6 months had passed since the Galactic Council's rejection of Earth's warning. The Void Sector had become the center of the greatest expansion effort in galactic history. Every major power wanted their share of what they believed was free real, a state waiting to be claimed. Admiral Crix stood on the bridge of his flagship Stellar Dominion and watched the largest Zephyrian fleet ever assembled. Over 300 warships stretched out before him in perfect formation. Dreadnoughts the size of small cities moved alongside sleek destroyers and massive carriers packed with fighter craft. The sight filled him with pride. "All ships report ready for jump," announced his aide Captain Thex. The younger Zephyrians' scales were bright with excitement. This was his first major campaign. "Excellent," Crix replied. "Signal the fleet. We jump in 10 minutes. Today the Zephyrian Empire claims its destiny." Behind them, the hegemony's own armada prepared for their own assault on the Void Sector. Supreme Admiral Corex commanded nearly 200 ships of various insectoid design. Her species had waited centuries for an opportunity like this. On Luna Base, Dr. Alex Carter worked frantically in his laboratory. The xenoarchaeologist had barely slept in weeks as he tried to decode more of the alien technology recovered from the Void Sector. Every new translation made him more afraid. "Helen, you need to see this," he called to his assistant, Dr. Susan Walsh. The woman hurried over to his workstation where holographic text scrolled past in an alien script. "I've broken through another layer of their archive system," Alex explained. The species that built those defenses called themselves the Architects. They were apparently at war with something called the Devourers. Susan leaned closer. "What happened to them?" "They're gone. Both species. But before they died, the Architects built a massive automated defense network. It's designed to activate whenever large military formations enter their territory." "Define large," Susan said, though she already suspected the answer. Alex pulled up the technical specifications. "Anything over 50 armed vessels triggers the primary response. Over 100 ships activates full war protocols." Susan felt sick. "The Zephyrian fleet alone has 300 ships. And that's just the first wave," Alex confirmed. "We need to warn them again." Back on Earth, President Helen Brooks sat in an emergency session with her military advisors. The reports from Luna Base lay spread across the conference table like a death sentence. "How certain are we about this translation?" she asked. "Alex has triple-checked everything," replied General Tom Bradley. "The Architect systems are still active and waiting. Any large fleet that enters the Void Sector will be treated as an invasion force." "We have to try one more time," Helen decided. "Send Commander Ryan Bell with our fastest ship. Maybe if they see the destruction beginning, they'll listen." The HFY UES Mercury launched from Earth orbit within hours. Commander Bell pushed the small diplomatic vessel to its maximum speed as he raced toward the Void Sector. Behind him, Earth's small fleet of 12 ships prepared for whatever might come next. Captain Lisa Ford watched the alien armadas from her position on the edge of the Void Sector. Her ship, UES Vigilant, had been monitoring the region for months, documenting the strange energy patterns that pulsed through the supposedly empty space. "Captain," called her sensor operator, Lieutenant Amy Foster, "I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures. Multiple fleets are about to drop out of jump." "Here we go," Lisa muttered. She opened a channel to Earth. "This is Vigilant. The alien fleets are arriving. Beginning full sensor recording." The first ships began appearing in flashes of twisted space. The Zephyrian vanguard emerged in a perfect tactical formation, followed by wave after wave of reinforcements. Admiral Crix's flagship took position at the center of the formation like a metal mountain floating in space. "Magnificent," Captain Thex breathed from his position on the Stellar Dominion's bridge. "The entire sector will be ours within a month." The hegemony fleet arrived shortly after, taking position on the opposite side of the sector. The two armadas faced each other across the void like rival predators sizing up their prey. Commander Bell's ship Mercury dropped out of hyperspace between the two fleets. He immediately broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Commander Ryan Bell of the United Earth Forces. I carry an urgent message for all fleet commanders. You are in extreme danger, please respond." Admiral Crix's communications officer looked puzzled. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from a human vessel." Ignore it, Crix ordered. Whatever they want can wait until after we've secured our territorial claims. Bell tried again. Admiral Crix, Supreme Admiral Corex, please listen to me. Our xenoarchaeologists have decoded more of the alien technology. This entire region is protected by automated defenses. You need to withdraw your fleets immediately. This time Corex responded personally. Her voice buzzed with irritation through the translation system. Human pest, your warnings were rejected by the Council. Cease these transmissions or we will consider you hostile. You don't understand, Bell pleaded. The defense systems activate based on fleet size. You have over 500 ships here. That's more than enough to trigger a full-scale response. Admiral Crix finally opened a channel. Commander Bell, you will withdraw from this sector immediately. Any further interference will be met with force. I'm trying to save your lives, Bell insisted. Please just send a small scout ship ahead. See what happens when it approaches those structures we detected. Enough, Crix snarled. All ships target the human vessel. If it moves closer, destroy it. Bell found himself painted by dozens of targeting systems. The Mercury's defensive. Screens would last about 3 seconds against that much firepower. Fine, he said quietly. You want to learn the hard way. Just remember that Earth tried to warn you. The Mercury jumped back to hyperspace, leaving the alien fleets alone in the void sector. Behind them, deep in the dark between the stars, ancient sensors began to wake up. The architect systems had been dormant for millions of years, but they recognized the signature of large military formations. Automated factories that had slept since the dawn of civilization began to hum with power. Weapons systems older than most species' entire evolutionary history started their activation sequences. The architects had built their defenses to last forever. They had programmed them to respond to any threat with overwhelming force. In their long-dead minds, anything that brought hundreds of warships into their territory could only be an enemy. Admiral Crix stood on his bridge and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there lay the riches of an entire sector. His people would remember this day as the beginning of a new golden age. He had no idea that he was about to become the target of weapons that could crack planets. The countdown to catastrophe had begun. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the great crystal chamber on Nexus Prime and felt very small. The massive dome above him sparkled with lights from 1,000 different worlds. Around him sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They were all staring at him with expressions that ranged from boredom to open mockery. The human ambassador took a deep breath and activated his presentation device. A holographic display filled the air above him, showing star charts and sensor readings. The assembled aliens barely glanced at it. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I come before you today with urgent information about the Void Sector. Our deep space exploration teams have discovered something that threatens us all. Low rumble of laughter came from the Zephyrian section. High Commander Veltar leaned forward in his massive throne, his 4 eyes gleaming with amusement. The reptilian alien was twice Jake's height, and his scales shimmered blue-green under the chamber lights. The humans wish to lecture us about galactic affairs, Veltar said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. How charming. Tell us, little mammal, what great wisdom does your backward species offer today? More laughter rippled through the assembly. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks but continued. Our scouts have found ancient structures in the void sector. They appear to be automated defense systems left by a vanished civilization. These systems are still active and extremely dangerous. The hegemony representative Crix unfolded from her seat. The insectoid alien's mandibles clicked together in what Jake recognized as dismissive amusement. Ancient toys, she buzzed. The void sector has been empty for millions of years. If there were truly dangerous artifacts there, we would have found them long ago. With respect, Jake replied, you haven't looked. The void sector has been ignored, precisely because it appears empty. But our teams have discovered technology that makes our most advanced weapons look like stone tools. Admiral Crix of the Andromedans spoke up from his floating platform. The energy being's form shifted and sparkled as he communicated through translated thought patterns. Humans have been in space for what, 200 of your years? We have been exploring the galaxy for millennia. Do you really think you could find something we missed? Jake activated another hologram. This one showed the massive geometric structures his team had discovered deep in the void sector. The constructs were clearly artificial, their surfaces covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. These aren't natural formations, Jake insisted. Our xenoarchaeologist, Dr. Alex Carter, has analyzed the materials. The technology is beyond anything in our current understanding. The power readings alone suggest weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. The chamber erupted in jeers and laughter. Several smaller species representatives openly pointed at Jake while chittering in their native languages. He didn't need a translator to understand their mockery. Veltar stood to his full imposing height. Enough of this foolishness. The humans seek to frighten us with ghost stories and blurry sensor readings. They wish to claim the void sector for themselves by declaring it dangerous. That's not true, Jake protested. We're sharing this information freely. We want to prevent a catastrophe. Catastrophe, Crix repeated, her mandibles clicking faster now. The same species that nearly destroyed themselves with primitive nuclear weapons warns us of catastrophe. The irony is delicious. Jake felt the weight of dismissal pressing down on him from all sides. These beings commanded fleets that could glass planets. Their civilizations spanned star systems. To them, humanity was a curious newcomer, barely worthy of notice. Please, he said, raising his voice. Just send a small probe mission to verify our findings. You don't have to take our word for it. See for yourselves. The Centaurian delegate spoke for the first time. Her voice was melodic but cold. We do not waste resources chasing human fantasies. The void sector will be explored and colonized according to galactic law, not human superstition. Admiral Crix's energy form pulsed brighter. The Andromedans concur. We have already allocated survey fleets for void sector expansion. These phantom threats will not deter legitimate exploration. Jake tried one more time. I'm begging you to reconsider. Our best scientists have studied these artifacts. The defensive systems are designed to activate when large military forces enter their territory. If you send fleets into that region, you're walking into a trap that was set millions of years ago. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Veltar began to laugh. It was a deep rumbling sound that echoed off the crystal walls. Soon other delegates joined in until the entire assembly was laughing at the desperate humans standing before them. Military forces. Veltar wheezed between laughs. The humans think their tiny ships constitute a military force. They project their limitations onto their betters. The vote is called, announced the council moderator, an ancient being whose species Jake couldn't identify. All in favor of accepting the human warning and restricting access to the void sector. Not a single appendage, tentacle, or energy field. Rose in support. All opposed. The chamber lit up with raised hands, claws, pseudopods, and energy signatures. The vote was unanimous except for Earth's single delegate. The motion fails, the moderator declared. Void sector expansion will proceed as scheduled. This session is concluded. As the delegates filed out, Jake stood alone in the center of the chamber. His presentation device powered down automatically, leaving him in the soft glow of the crystal dome. He had tried his best to warn them. History would record that Earth had attempted to prevent what was coming. High Commander Veltar paused as he passed Jake. The massive alien looked down at the human with something that might have been pity. Your species means well, Veltar said quietly. But you must learn your place in the galactic order. Leave the important decisions to those who understand the true scope of the universe. Jake watched the alien delegation depart and wondered how many of them would still be alive in 6 months. He activated his communicator and sent a priority message back to Earth. Mission failed. They're going in anyway. May God help them all. The news of the Zephyrian fleet's destruction spread through the galaxy like wildfire. But instead of caution, it bred fury and disbelief. Admiral Crix's surviving ships limped back to their home worlds with tales of impossible weapons and ancient horrors. The galactic powers refused to accept that primitive artifacts could destroy their mighty fleets. Supreme Admiral Corex paced the bridge of her new flagship, the massive carrier, Hive Mother. Around her, the greatest armada in hegemony history, prepared for what she called a punitive expedition. 300 ships of various insectoid design filled space around the staging area. The Zephyrians were caught off guard, she buzzed to her assembled captains. They walked into an obvious trap because they were too arrogant to scout properly. We will not make their mistake. Captain Vexon of the destroyer. Stinger nodded agreement. Our intelligence suggests the weapons are tied to those ancient structures. We destroy the structures, we eliminate the threat. Precisely, Corex confirmed. We will begin with long-range bombardment to weaken their defenses, then move in for the kill. These museum pieces will not stop the hegemony. Meanwhile, the Andromedans prepared their own response. Admiral Crix's energy form pulsed with anger as he briefed his fleet commanders. The energy beings had decided that their honor demanded vengeance for the insult to galactic civilization. Deploy the Titan-class dreadnoughts, he ordered. If these ancient weapons want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget. Our plasma projectors can crack planets. Some old ruins won't stand a chance. The Centaurian Republic chose a different approach. Their ghost fleet specialized in stealth, operations, and precision strikes. Admiral Lin Zhao believed that surgical attacks on key targets would succeed where brute force had failed. We'll phase cloak the entire fleet, she explained to her officers. Hit the control centers before they know we're there. Quick, clean, and efficient. On Luna Base, Dr. Alex Carter worked frantically to understand more about the architect systems. Every new piece of data made him more worried about what the galactic powers were planning. They're not listening, he told Dr. Susan Walsh as reports of the gathering fleets reached Earth. Look at these readings from the Void Sector. The architect systems are using the wreckage from the Zephyrian fleet to build new defenses. Susan studied the sensor data. The energy signatures are different now, stronger. It's like the grid is learning from each attack. That's exactly what it's doing, Alex confirmed. The architects built their defenses to adapt and evolve. Every ship that gets destroyed makes the system more dangerous. President Helen Brooks called an emergency session of Earth's Security Council. The small conference room felt cramped as Earth's military leaders tried to process the scale of what was happening. How many ships are we talking about? She asked General Bradley. Over 800 across all the major fleets, he replied grimly. The hegemony alone has 300. The Andromedans are bringing their entire battle fleet. The Centaurians are deploying their ghost fleet. We have to try to stop them, Helen decided. Send every ship we have. Maybe if they see us trying to help, they'll listen to reason. Captain Nathan Hughes received his orders aboard the UES Horizon. Earth's entire deep space fleet consisted of just 12 ships, but they would do what they could. The small task force set course for the Void Sector at maximum speed. The Hegemony fleet arrived first, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Architect defense grid. Supreme Admiral Corex studied the ancient structures through her sensors and felt confident in her plan. Begin long-range bombardment, she ordered. Target the largest structures first. Destroy their command centers. The Hegemony ships opened fire from extreme range. Quantum torpedoes and plasma charges streaked across space toward the alien constructs. The weapons struck their targets and detonated in brilliant flashes of light. When the explosions faded, the structures remained completely undamaged. Impossible, Captain Vexon muttered. Our weapons should have shattered those things. The Architect defenses responded with mechanical precision. Energy beams reached out across the vast distance to strike the attacking ships. The Hegemony, Destroyer Mantis, was the first to die, cut cleanly in half by a weapon that ignored its shields completely. Evasive maneuvers, Corex screamed. Close to attack range. We'll overwhelm them with concentrated fire. The Hegemony fleet surged forward, their ships weaving through space to avoid the deadly energy beams. More vessels died as they closed the distance, but Corex pressed the attack. As the fleet entered the inner defense perimeter, new threats emerged. Swarms of smaller constructs rose from hidden positions among the larger structures. These were built from the wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet, their hulls still bearing the scars of their original destruction. What in the void are those things? Vexon demanded. His sensor operator's voice was tight with fear. They appear to be automated fighters, sir. constructed from salvaged ship components. The fighter swarms fell on the hegemony fleet like a plague of metal locusts. They moved with impossible coordination, striking weak points with surgical precision. Each fighter was built from the remains of destroyed warships, making them nearly as tough as the original vessels. The Andromedan fleet arrived in the middle of the battle. Admiral Crick surveyed the carnage and made his decision immediately. "Deploy the Titan dreadnoughts," he ordered. "Maximum firepower. Turn this entire region to plasma." The massive Andromedan ships were the most powerful weapons platforms in known space. Their plasma projectors could indeed crack planets, and they brought all that firepower to bear on the ancient defenses. For a moment, it seemed like the attack might succeed. The concentrated fire from the Titan-class ships actually damaged some of the smaller architect constructs. But then, the grid's adaptive systems kicked in. New structures began emerging from the depths of space. These were larger and more heavily armored than anything seen before. They had been built specifically to counter the type of weapons the Andromedans were using. The return fire was devastating. Plasma beams that could melt asteroids struck the Andromedan fleet. Even the mighty Titan dreadnoughts crumpled under the assault. Admiral Crix watched his flagship's shields collapse and felt despair for the first time in his long existence. His people had commanded the galaxy for centuries, but they were helpless against these ancient horrors. The Centaurian Ghost Fleet tried to use their stealth technology to avoid the massacre. Admiral Zhao's ships phase-cloaked and attempted to slip past the defenses undetected, but the architect systems had fought enemies with similar capabilities millions of years ago. Sensors that could detect quantum fluctuations locked onto the cloaked ships immediately. Stealth compromised. Zhao's tactical officer reported in panic. "They can see right through our cloaking fields." The invisible ships became visible again as energy beams found them. The Ghost Fleet's advantage had always been their ability to strike unseen. Without that edge, they were just lightly armored, scouts facing weapons that could destroy dreadnoughts. Captain Hughes arrived with Earth's small fleet just as the slaughter reached its peak. The UES Horizon sensors showed hundreds of ships dying in the space of minutes. "All vessels maintain safe distance," Hughes ordered. "Begin rescue operations. Pick up any survivors you can find." Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster looked up from her sensor station. "Sir, I'm detecting life pods from several alien ships. Zephyrian, Hegemony, and Andromedan signatures. Move us in. Get as many as we can." The human ships darted through the edge of the battle zone, their small size allowing them to avoid most of the architect weapons. They pulled survivors from the wreckage of mighty fleets, offering aid to the same beings who had mocked Earth's warnings. Among the survivors was Captain Thex, barely alive in his escape pod after the destruction of the Storm Render. As the human medics worked to save his life, he whispered through his breathing apparatus, "You tried to warn us. Your people tried to warn us all." Amy Foster knelt beside the injured Zephyrian. "We're going to get you home, Captain. Just hold on." The battle raged for 6 more hours before the surviving alien ships finally retreated. When it was over, nearly 700 vessels lay destroyed in the void. The architect defenses had grown stronger with each wave of attackers, using the wreckage to build more weapons and fighters. Dr. Susan Walsh monitored the aftermath from Earth's deep space station. The sensor readings showed the defense grid, expanding, incorporating the destroyed fleets into its structure. "It's getting bigger," she reported to Alex. "Every ship they destroyed is being converted into more defenses. At this rate, the grid will span half the sector within a year." Alex stared at the data in horror. "We have to find a way to shut it down. If this continues, the architect systems will see the entire galaxy as a threat." The harvest of ships and crews was complete. The ancient defenses had fed well on the arrogance of the galactic powers, and they were still hungry for more. The void sector had become a monument to galactic arrogance. Thousands of wrecked ships drifted through space like metal tombstones, their hulls twisted and broken by weapons beyond comprehension. The architect defense grid now spanned 3 star systems grown fat on the resources of destroyed fleets. Captain Lisa Ford stood on the bridge of the UES Vigilant and surveyed the graveyard that had once been the pride of galactic civilization. Beside her, Admiral Crix's energy form flickered weakly. The Andromedan had lost most of his fleet and barely escaped with his existence intact. How many survivors total? Lisa asked her communications officer. Approximately 12,000 across. All species, Lieutenant Amy Foster replied. That's out of nearly 400,000 who entered the sector. The numbers were staggering. The greatest military disaster in galactic history had played out exactly as Earth had predicted. The surviving alien commanders no longer spoke of human primitiveness or backwater warnings. Supreme Admiral Korex sat in the medical bay of the human rescue ship UES Pathfinder. Her chitinous form was scarred from her escape pod's crash landing on an asteroid. The proud hegemony leader who had once mocked humanity now owed her life to human medics. "Why did you save us?" she asked Dr. Jack Morrison, the human physician treating her wounds. Jack looked up from his scanner. "Because it was the right thing to do. We warned you about the danger, but that doesn't mean we wanted you to die." Korex's mandibles clicked, in what might have been shame. "My people called yours weak and foolish. We said humans lacked the strength to survive in the galaxy. Maybe being strong isn't about having the biggest guns," Jack replied quietly. "Maybe it's about knowing when not to use them." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral world of Haven Station. The great crystal chamber, that had once hosted mockery and dismissal, now held only the sobering weight of catastrophe. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked to the center of the chamber for the second time in less than a year. This time, no one was laughing. The assembled delegates listened in complete silence as he presented his proposal. "The Void Sector is now a restricted zone," Jake announced. "Earth is establishing a quarantine perimeter to prevent further expansion of the Architect defense grid. Any vessel attempting to enter the affected region will be turned back." High Commander Veltar, his scales now dulled with defeat, spoke first. "By what authority do humans claim jurisdiction over galactic space?" Jake's response was calm and measured. "By the authority of being the only species that understood the threat. We warned you. You didn't listen. Now we're cleaning up the mess." Admiral Crix's energy form pulsed weakly from his position near the back of the chamber. "What about our people trapped in the wreckage? There could still be survivors." "We're conducting rescue operations with volunteer crews from multiple species," Jake confirmed. "But any large-scale military response will only make the situation worse. The Architect systems adapt to every attack. They're stronger now than when this started." The Centaurian delegate Admiral Lin Zhao raised her hand. "What do you propose we do about the expanding defense grid?" Jake activated a holographic display showing the current extent of the Architect systems. "We establish monitoring stations at safe distances. We study the technology until we understand how to shut it down safely, and we make sure this never happens again." Captain Nathan Hughes piloted his ship UES Horizon through the edge of the debris field, searching for survivors. His crew had pulled dozens of aliens from the wreckage over the past week. Each rescue operation brought them face to face with beings who had once considered humans beneath their notice. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 6, reported his sensor operator. "Weak life signs. Looks like a Zephyrian escape pod. Move us in carefully. Those Architect drones are still active in this area." The rescue operation took 2 hours. The survivor was Captain Thex, barely conscious but alive. As the human medics carried him to the sickbay, he grabbed Nathan's arm. "Your warnings," Thex whispered. "They were true. All of them." Nathan nodded grimly. "We tried to tell you. I wish you had listened." Back on Earth, Dr. Alex Carter worked with a team of scientists from a dozen different species. The survivors had brought with them sensor data and wreckage samples that were helping the research team understand the Architect technology. "The good news is that the systems aren't truly malevolent," Alex explained to the assembled researchers. "They're defensive, in nature. They only attack what they perceive as military threats." Dr. Susan Walsh looked up from her analysis station. "What's the bad news?" "The bad news is that they define military threat very broadly. Any group of armed ships triggers their response. The threshold keeps getting lower as they adapt." A Zephyrian scientist named Dr. Texar, one of the few military researchers to survive the disaster, added his own observations. Our data suggests the systems are learning to recognize different species and their technologies. Each battle makes them more efficient. So how do we shut them down? Asked Dr. Lin Wei, a Centaurian xenoarchaeologist. Alex pulled up the translation, matrices he had been working on. We need to access their core programming. The architects built safeguards into the system, but activating them requires specific authorization codes. And how do we get those codes? Susan asked. We already have them, Alex replied with a tired smile. They're built into the warning messages the system broadcasts. The problem is that they're in a language that's been dead for millions of years. The work continued for months. Scientists from across the galaxy collaborated on the project, united by the common thread of the expanding architect grid. Slowly, painstakingly, they deciphered the ancient codes. Captain Ford led the first joint mission back into the Void sector. Her ship carried representatives from every major species, working together under human command. The irony was not lost on anyone involved. Approaching the primary control structure, reported Amy Foster from the sensor station. The architect systems are scanning us, but they're not firing. That's because we're not broadcasting military IDs, explained Dr. Alex Carter from his position at the science station. As far as the system knows, we're a civilian research vessel. The ancient structure loomed before them, its crystalline surfaces pulsing with the light of contained energy. Ford's team transmitted the authorization codes that months of research had finally unlocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pulsing lights began to change color, shifting from aggressive red to peaceful blue. It's working, Alex breathed. The system is accepting the shutdown sequence. One by one, the architect constructs across the sector began powering down. The weapons that had destroyed hundreds of ships went silent. The automated factories stopped, building new defenses. After millions of years of waiting, the ancient guardians finally rested. The final session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in the organization's history. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood before an assembly that had learned the hardest lesson possible about the dangers of arrogance. Earth accepts the role of Void Sector Administrator, he announced. We will maintain monitoring stations to ensure the architect systems remain dormant. We will also coordinate search and rescue operations for any remaining survivors. High Commander Veltar, his scales now bearing the scars of his escape from the disaster, stood to address the assembly. I speak for the Zephyrian Empire when I say that we formally acknowledge our error. Earth warned us of this danger and we chose to ignore that warning. The responsibility for this disaster lies with us, not with humanity. Similar statements came from the other major powers. The beings who had once mocked Earth's primitive understanding now recognized that wisdom and technology were not the same thing. Supreme Admiral Corex, her voice subdued by her recent experiences, made the final statement. The hegemony proposes that Earth be granted permanent security oversight for all future deep space exploration. Your species has proven that sometimes the smallest voice carries the most important message. The vote was unanimous. Years later, Commander Ryan Bell stood on the bridge of the UES Guardian, one of the monitoring stations that kept watch over the dormant architect systems. Around him, human and alien crew members worked side by side, united by the shared knowledge of what lay sleeping in the darkness. Status report, Bell requested. All systems remain dormant, reported his Zephyrian science officer. No unusual activity detected. Bell nodded and walked to the observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see the vast graveyard of ships that served as a permanent reminder of galactic arrogance. The wrecks would drift there forever, a memorial to the price of refusing to listen. But among the wreckage, he could also see something else. The new research stations and rescue facilities that had been built through cooperation between species. The joint patrol ships that kept the region safe. The scientists from a dozen worlds working together to understand the ancient technology. Humanity had gained respect not through conquest but through wisdom. They had proven that sometimes the greatest strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to prevent destruction. The galaxy had learned to listen to Earth's warnings. The hard way. Captain Thex felt excitement course through his scales as his battlecruiser Storm Render led the Zephyrian vanguard deeper into the void sector. Behind him, 50 of the Empire's finest warships followed in perfect formation. The sensors showed nothing but empty space ahead, exactly what the fleet had expected to find. Maintain course for grid reference 77 Alpha, Thex ordered. Begin preliminary survey sweeps. I want to know about every asteroid and gas cloud in this region. His sensor operator suddenly straightened. Captain, I'm detecting artificial structures bearing 27 Mark IV. Range approximately 50,000 kilometers. Thex moved to the sensor station. The display showed massive geometric shapes floating in the darkness. They were clearly manufactured, but their design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. How big are they? Thex asked. The largest one is roughly 8 kilometers across, the operator replied. They appear to be made of some kind of crystalline metal. No energy signatures detected. Derelicts, Thex concluded. Probably left over from some forgotten civilization. Continue approach. These ruins might contain valuable technology. The Storm Render moved closer to the ancient structures. Through the main viewer, Thex could see them more clearly now. They were beautiful in a haunting way, their surfaces covered in patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Still no energy readings, reported the sensor operator. Whatever these things are, they've been dead for a very long time. Thex activated his communicator. Admiral Crix, this is Storm Render. We've found artificial structures requesting permission to investigate. Crix's voice crackled back across the fleet channel. Proceed with caution, Captain. Deploy a full scanner drone first. I want complete analysis before any of my ships get too close. Understood, sir. Launching probe now. The small scanner drone shot away from Storm Render and approached the nearest structure. Its sensors went to work immediately, mapping every surface detail and analyzing the strange materials. On Earth's monitoring station, Dr. Susan Walsh watched the unfolding events through long-range telescopes. She could see the heat signatures of the alien fleets as they spread out through the void sector. They're getting close to the primary defense grid, she reported to Dr. Carter. The Zephyrian vanguard is within 50,000 kilometers of the main structures. Alex joined her at the sensor console. Any response from the architect systems? Not yet, but look at this. Susan highlighted several readings on her screen. I'm detecting power fluctuations deep inside those structures. Something is waking up. Back on the Storm Render, the scanner drone had completed its initial sweep. The data it transmitted made Captain Thex lean forward with interest. The structures are definitely artificial, his science officer reported. The materials are incredibly advanced, some kind of self-repairing crystal metal composite that should have degraded millions of years ago. Any signs of technology we can salvage? Thex asked. Extensive internal networks, but they all appear inactive. Wait. The science officer's expression changed. I'm detecting increasing energy flows. The structures are powering up. Thex felt a chill run down his spine. Weapons? Unknown. The energy patterns don't match anything in our databases. Suddenly, the nearest structure blazed with light. Lines of brilliant energy raced across its surface like lightning trapped in crystal. Other structures began lighting up in sequence, creating a web of power that stretched across thousands of cubic kilometers. All ships, this is Admiral Crix. Report status immediately. Thex opened his channel. Storm Render reporting. The ancient structures are activating. Unknown energy buildup in progress. Are they targeting us? Crix demanded. Negative, sir. No weapons lock detected. But the power levels are climbing rapidly. Deep inside the architect defense grid, systems that had waited eons for this moment finally completed their startup sequences. Threat assessment protocols examined the approaching fleets with mechanical precision. The analysis was simple and absolute. Large military formations had entered protected space. The response was predetermined. Warning systems tried to activate, but the civilizations they were programmed to contact had been dust for millions of years. Emergency broadcasts went out on frequencies no living being remembered. Ancient diplomatic protocols attempted to establish contact with species that no longer existed. When all warnings failed, the architect systems moved to their final option. The first weapon to fire was a lance of concentrated energy that could have carved through a moon. It struck the Stormrender amidships and passed completely through the battlecruiser without slowing down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive warship simply fell apart along the line of the cut. Captain Thex had just enough time to see his ship's rear section drifting away before the bridge lost atmosphere, and everything went dark. Admiral Crix watched in horror as his vanguard was systematically destroyed. More energy beams lanced out from the ancient structures, each one finding its target with impossible accuracy. Ships that had taken years to build died in seconds. All vessels. Evasive maneuvers, Crix shouted. Return fire. Destroy those structures. The Zephyrian fleet opened up with everything they had. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and particle beams hammered the architect constructs. The ancient defenses absorbed the assault without apparent damage and continued their methodical destruction of the attacking fleet. Lieutenant Amy Foster aboard the UES Vigilant watched the battle through her sensors. Captain Ford, the Zephyrian fleet is taking massive casualties. They've lost over 30 ships in less than 10 minutes. Captain Ford felt sick as she watched the destruction. Each blip that vanished from her screen represented hundreds or thousands of lives lost. Any response to our warnings? The surviving ships are too busy trying to escape to acknowledge our transmissions. The Hegemony fleet, watching from their position on the other side of the sector, began to withdraw. Supreme Admiral Corex had seen enough to know that her forces stood no chance against whatever was destroying the Zephyrians. But as the Hegemony ships turned to flee, more architect structures began activating throughout the region. The defense grid was vast, spanning multiple star systems. Any military vessel within its boundaries was considered a legitimate target. Energy beams reached out across impossible distances to strike fleeing ships. The Hegemony destroyer Razor Wind was caught in mid-jump, its hyperspace field collapsing, as the ship was cut in half. Admiral Crix's flagship Stellar Dominion shuddered as near misses from the alien weapons overloaded its shields. The massive dreadnought was tough enough to survive a few hits, but Crix could see that they were trapped. Jump calculations complete, his navigator reported. But sir, the alien weapons are interfering with our hyperspace generators. Jump probability is only 60%. Take it, Crix ordered. Anything is better than staying here. The Stellar Dominion vanished in a flash of twisted space, followed by the handful of other Zephyrian ships that had survived the initial assault. Behind them, the architect defenses continued their relentless patrol, waiting for the next wave of intruders. In the depths of space, ancient factories began working again. The defense grid had been damaged by the alien assault, but the architects had planned for such contingencies. Automated construction systems began building new weapons platforms, using the wreckage of destroyed ships as raw materials. Dr. Susan Walsh watched the aftermath through her instruments. Where once there had been a mighty fleet, now only debris and corpses drifted in the void. Alex, she said quietly, we tried to warn them. I know, he replied. But they wouldn't listen. Now the architect systems are fully active. God help anyone else who tries to enter that region. The first battle was over, but the war had only just begun,